Seek the old blood. Thank you all for sharing this moment with me. I know that this means as much for you all as it does for me. When I look out at you all, I am surprised at how many I recognize. It speaks well for the community we have created amongst ourselves, and I am so proud of all for believing in us, for having faith in the gods. They are the true reason we are standing here. And when I see some of your faces, I am reminded that without their grace, this crowd would not look as healthy as it does. Lawrence paused, looking over the large mass of believers that had congregated for the first time afore him on the round plaza as he stood on the first step on the ascent to the grand cathedral. Today, a new age begins. Our approach to become closer with our faith, with our gods. And I am thrilled to have you all alongside me for this quest. Behind me, Lawrence stepped back from the podium and turned around to quickly gesture at the immense, towering grand cathedral. Stands the testament to their glory. Here, all of you will always be welcome to deepen your faith and seek our aid. I will take the role as its vicar, and I will do my best to live up to such a task. But before we officially open the gates, I would like to declare the names of the generous men and women who selflessly stood by our side as the church arose. He turned his head to the side, where a number of individuals proudly stood during his speech, in a neat little line. Now was their cue to approach, as he extended a hand towards them. A prestigious doctor, a wealthy widow, all had their turn standing beside the new vicar's side, while he was forced to say something admirable about them and their deeds. A painful and drawn-out display. But who was he to complain? If all they wanted was to be recognized for their contribution, then it seemed meager repayment for what they had made real. Yet he irked with himself at being the medium through which the aristocrats battled one another and bragged about how much money they could waste. Now, here is a man with a devotion like no other. He has devoted his life entirely to the name of the gods, and he is an extraordinary teacher to his flock. Master Logarius. The man strode up with heavenly grace, donned in the golden robe and mantle that nearly outshined the vicar's own white garb with black detail. He was tailed by two brutish-looking men, wrapped in light blue robes, thick leather armguards and boots, and a billowing mantle. Thank you for your service, and I know that Yharnam will enjoy your deeds for years to come. They shook hands very formally, and Logarius waved to the cheering crowd as he left the center of attention. Now, here is someone you know well and who has believed in us since the beginning. Our reliable and faithful Mayor Ethelbert. The crowd erupted in applause as the man walked merrily up to the podium. Out of all the characters, Ethelbert received a formal handshake and a formal hug. The gesture was sincere. After all, he had done the most. Thank you, Mayor. Without you, we would not have had the opportunity to further both our faith and our practice. The people thanks you, and the gods graces you. After the mayor left, surprisingly without saying a word, Lawrence looked to those that truly mattered, those that truly had been there from the beginning. German, Maria, Luna and Carol stood to the side behind him, and further behind them he saw many other faces he had the highest regard for. The students that came with him from Bergenworth, and even some who followed later, now dressed in the white formal robes of the clergy. When he saw them all standing as they did, the world made a brief pause, as if divinity had truly graced him. He turned back to the crowd with a blessed smile on his face. Let us pray. Let us wish. Let us partake in communion, in reverence of the old blood. Were it not for fear, death would go unlamented. Fear the old blood. He gripped the shiny scissors that lay on the podium, walked over and with a look back to the crowd, cut the ribbon. Cheering and applause thundered. The grand cathedral was open. Despite churchly appearance, behind its walls, few sermons occurred. To Lawrence's delight, they had left the masses to Master Logarius' preaching. If the public wanted spiritual guidance in addition to the blood healing, it would be best conducted in the hand of an actual cleric. He could not blame them, for part of him had foreseen the reaction. An educated mind would take the medium of the gods with the reasonability of a scholar, but the masses were more so inclined to simply revel in its mere existence. For the first time, he felt the people were actually given a true sign of a miracle. It was so powerful in its clarity that he had even contemplated if he himself had become more religious by it. The first thing one encountered when entering the cathedral was a large chapel hall where the masses could gather. There stood a massive monument recognizable through the memory of Yharnam, where Lawrence had let move the statue of the fair maiden that stood outside the old church, now crowning the cathedral altar. The healing maiden pouring her vessel down onto the pleading and sick masses, symbolizing Yharnam's ancient struggle and subsequent victory with the aid of the gods. But behind the altar lay entry to the truer place of the structure, the research hall. Despite now being seen as clerics and not scholars, it did nothing to alter their purpose and execution of research. The research hall was an immense complex of alcoves and staircases, with all floors accessible through the giant pillar in its center, which supported all the serpentine staircases. If one were to stand at the bottom floor, one could look up into the ceiling while counting all the floors from the railed walkways. While Lawrence was giving a tour to the researchers who would work the place, he was approached by Maria. Recently his concern for her had grown, as she had distanced herself from the healing practices, spending more time with German's surveillance mission, and he was, admittedly a bit surprised.
Lawrence, can I have a word with you, please?
Certainly. He turned to quickly address his following. If you would step inside here for a bit, I will arrive shortly. Inside you will have the opportunity to examine what you eventually will be working with. He gestured towards a doorway in which they entered, talking with hushed words to each other. I was hoping you would come by. She silently went to lean against the tall railing.
I am then considered?
Considered? Why, Maria, you were my first prime candidate for the position. I cannot imagine anyone more fitting. Don't you think I hadn't noticed the passion with which you have treated, oh, so many patients around Yarnam? The enthusiastic compliment seemed to fall on deaf ears, as she displayed little emotions, save for a tired sigh.
That is good.
Or perhaps I could consider someone who would smile more about it. She met his eyes and was not amused. I honestly thought you would be more thrilled. She shrugged feebly.
It is what it is. And it is good. It is needed, if we are to right this mess.
Mess? What do you mean? Her mood had spawned unpredictably. He had never seen her in such an agitated state. When he expressed his bewildered face, she nearly lunged forward in frustration at him.
How can you be so blind as to what you are doing? Your healing is cursing people. None has any regards for anyone's well-being.
Oh, Maria, please. I did not mean to offend. He cast nervous glances around, worried for unwanted attention. This is science. There will be some sacrifices here and there. But look at what it is truly doing. It brings prosperity and health to the city.
And you are truly able to live with the knowledge of what that prosperity has done to some? I told you, didn't I? And so did Willem.
She had flared up to the degree she was now flustered on the cheeks and breathed heavier. He simply responded with pacification, surprise subsiding and concern growing. I know what you struggle with, out there in the nights. I don't want you to feel this way. So please, tell me what is truly bothering you. I would not continue on without everyone's blessing. I would not want to. He wanted to meet her eyes, but she constantly averted them. That is why I want you here, in the research hall. I insist, actually. Who better would be able to spread their unbound compassion to patients and doctors alike? You will sanction all projects that occur within these walls, as well as working with Luna's up-and-coming department. Her eyes had sunk to the floor. Another tired sigh escaped her.
That sounds nice, Lawrence.
Her tone being everything else than excited. They stood for a while. Come now, Maria. Don't make me beg. It's plain to see, at least for me. Won't you please talk to me? It was like she grew petrified.
I am afraid, Lawrence.
She whispered. What has you feared?
Have you forgotten what we did all those years ago?
No, I have not.
Why did you really do it? Despite its lack of human nature, a child is still a child.
Please, Maria. I wish not to speak of it. It's something I'm not proud of.
But do you regret it?
He was silent for a long while. There was no easy answer to give. No.
You know, ever since I have had dreams of that place, of hearing that child scream, calling out for its mother. Then, when the dreams subsided, I could still hear it scream in every other dream. Now, if I pay attention and listen carefully, I can hear the scream while awake. Executioner garb, attire worn by the band of executioners commanded by the martyr Logarius, later became the basis for all church attire, with its heavy draping of holy shawl. As the great Logarius once said, acts of goodness are not always wise, and acts of evil are not always foolish, but regardless, we shall always strive to be good.